Well, welcome. I'm Julina Ogilvie. This is the 108th episode. Can I say that right? Of Women on Wealth.
Think so.
Today, we're diving into the legal side of entrepreneurship, from choosing the right business structure to managing risk, hiring your first employee. These are the foundational decisions that can make or break your success. And joining me is Robyn Drucker, a transactional attorney at Cohen and Wolf. She serves as chair of the firm's business and corporate and real estate groups. She represents companies of all sizes, from startups to established organizations, helping them structure, negotiate, and close complex business transactions. She's recognized in so many places that I'm not going to list them all today, but some of her awards include Best Lawyers in America and Women in Business Excellence in Business Award from the Fairfield County Chamber. She brings both deep expertise, practical understanding of what it takes to grow a successful business while balancing the risk. Hi, Robyn.
Hi, Angelina. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited you're here. Thank you for joining. You and I have been talking about this idea for a long time, and both
Yeah,
of us have been really busy this year, which is great. We're both moms, and some of the kids stuff gets in the way. So I'm really glad we're finally together.
me too. And thank you for your patience on that.
No, it was me too. So really quickly before we get going, we're going to cover, I think, three key areas today, if this is fair. We're going to talk the first legal steps that women should take when starting a business.
Mhm.
Then we're going to talk about how to manage risk and protect personal and business assets. And then finally, what to know when hiring your first employee.
Sounds good.
Sounds good? Awesome.
Hmm.
All right. Well, let's kick it off then.
Okay.
Let's first talk about the legal essentials for women entrepreneurs. And I guess my first question would be, what are those first legal steps that a woman should take when starting a business?
Okay. So I think that the first step actually before doing anything is coming up with a plan. I really think it's important to think about short-term goals and long-term goals, to collect and talk with trusted advisors and other entrepreneurs who've done this before, to learn the pitfalls very early and try to avoid them. I think it's important to remember to start small, and to take things one step at a time. Successful businesses are not built in a day. They're built methodically, slowly over time. And I think that at the very, very beginning stages, all business owners should really be thinking about, do I just have a really good idea here, or do I have a business plan? And what is that business going to look like? What am I doing? Am I providing a service? Am I selling products? And how do I plan to do that? And in what way? Is it going to be online? Am I going to have a store? How am I going to do that? I think it's important to know how much money you think you're going to need upfront, because that will help you understand where you are positioned financially, whether you need to take on investors, whether you think you might need to take on any kind of debt in order to carry out your business from day one. I think you need to, this is a lot, I know.
It's a lot, but it's
um,
so important.
have a general awareness of legal requirements. So are there any permits that are required? Are there any registrations that you need, either personally or as a business, to carry out what it is that you want to do? Do
Mm.
you know an insurance broker? It's good to talk to someone about the insurance that might be advisable, depending on what field you're in specifically. Going back to partners, are you going to have any partners in the business? What type of legal structure do you want to have? So one of the things we'll talk about later is protecting your personal assets. And
Mhm.
one of the ways that we suggest that folks do that is by forming an entity to run the business, own the business, and any separately, maybe even any real estate that may be owned by the business or used in connection with the business. And so it's important to think about, do I need an LLC? Do I need a corporation? Am I going to be a partnership? Am I going to be for profit? Will I be a nonprofit? What type of entity structure makes the best sense? And how do I structure that properly so that I'm protecting my personal assets and setting myself up for success? And when
Mhm.
I say that, I mean, do you have the correct governing documents in place, an operating agreement, bylaws, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So I could go on and on, I think, but I think those are the key things to think about when you're
Yeah.
starting a business, so that you, again, set up the foundation and the framework for
Mhm.
success. And it can seem, I think when folks are entrepreneurs, it can seem daunting to do that and expensive, but I think it's a worthwhile investment up front. If you get the right team in place, they're going to know that you're an entrepreneur and that you don't necessarily have deep pockets, but that you're trying to do it the right way. And
Yeah.
they'll give you the right framework and you can build from there.
You clearly need a team. I can only imagine how many entrepreneurs come to you with, I have an idea. What should I do? Because you
Right.
just listed so many questions.
Right.
And that's a huge leap to get from, I have an idea to here's my idea and here's my plan and here's everything that I need to know.
Right.
And most often you can't do it on your own.
Absolutely not. And I think that's the other thing is entrepreneurs should know you can't do it on your own.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that you don't know about, right? You may know all there is to know about your one business or your product or the service that you provide, but there's no expectation that you should know how to set up a business.
Yes. Yeah.
You're not a lawyer.
And why we say team, because you and I were talking about this before, you're not going to have the best answers from like an insurance perspective or from a, how does this align with your personal financial plan, right?
Right.
Things like that. So that's why you need that team. So
Right. And nor am I an accountant. And we work hand in hand with all different professionals to help people get set up properly from day one. And in fact, in any type of transaction that we're working on, we'll often say, hey, pause for a second. Did you talk to your accountant?
mhm.
Did you talk to your financial planner? Like, do you know what the effects of this are going to be? Are we structuring this in a smart way to get you the maximum benefit that we possibly can?
Yeah. And I think we're gonna you just gave me an idea that we'll circle on back in a little bit. But
Okay.
so when it comes to women entrepreneurs, what are some unique issues that you find there and what are some strategies that they can employ?
So I think that with women entrepreneurs, especially, and I get a lot of calls from women in all different sort of positions. So some are women who have an idea and they want to start a business. Others are women who may have inherited a business from a deceased spouse and really don't know the business world that they're in, but know they need to sell those assets so that they can get out of the business and protect their nest egg there, for retirement or what have you. So I think depending on where you are in that, but oftentimes across the board, there's this feeling of unequal bargaining power there, or there's a feeling of lack of trust in yourself. Like, I don't really know I don't know what there is to know about this negotiation, or I'm sort of the weakest person in the room.
Mhm.
So I think just being able to, and how do I mitigate that, right? So I'm constantly on the phone with my clients saying, hey, listen to your gut. Don't doubt yourself. If you feel like something isn't right here or you should be entitled to more, let's talk about that. Let's talk about why you feel that way. And let's talk about how we can translate into something that I can go out and negotiate on your behalf. I think a lot of it is about confidence and about walking into a room. They say fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Even if you don't feel it,
hmm
act like you have the confidence and act like you deserve to be at the table, because doubting yourself
Yeah.
sets you up for being doubted by others, I think.
hmm
Obviously, it's easy for me to say that now, and it's harder when you're actually at the table with someone, but it's important to have a team that is building you up
Yeah.
and reminding you of that every day. The other thing is that I see that women entrepreneurs sometimes come to me with is they say, well, such and such, this person really wants to do a deal with me. And I say, well, how are things going for you? And they say, well, things are fine. Things are actually going really well. They're better this year than last year. Okay. And were they better last year than the year before? Yeah, they were. And they say, okay, well, so this person wants to do a deal with you, but do you need them? Do you want to do a deal with them? Do you want to move?
Yeah.
You may have to give up control. You may have to give up equity in your business in order to move forward with this transition or this transaction. Is that something that you want? And that pause, sometimes they haven't considered that before, because
Yeah.
there's just this feeling that, oh, if somebody wants to do a deal with me, I should automatically want to, take advantage of that, whatever it might be.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, and you and I were
Yep.
talking about this earlier. It's like also, well, do you know if it's aligned with your future financial plan, right?
Right.
Are you set up for what you want in your desired outcomes? Or if it's not, then where do you need to be, you know?
Right. And if you want to do a deal with a particular person or with a particular partner, the structure that they come to you with may not work for you.
Yeah.
And it's okay to say, no, that structure doesn't really work for me. But what works for me would be, I want all my cash up front, let's
Yeah.
say. I don't want to pay out over time because my
Yeah.
financial planner said whatever it might be, the tax benefit is better if I structure it differently.
Yeah.
And it's fine. And that's fine to say. The other thing is you don't have to do deals.
Yeah.
If things are going okay, you can just stay in your lane and keep it
Mhm.
simple if you want to.
Exactly.
We're in the driver's seat.
That was what I wanted to circle back to, so I'm glad you hit it right up front. So, so as a business grows, what are the key legal considerations that entrepreneurs need to keep in mind when they're scaling?
So I think that small business growth is this perpetual cycle of evaluation and reevaluation. Not only staying true to our plan, right? The whole point is to have the plan, but to your purpose, meeting your legal obligations, most importantly for me, and making sure that you establish processes and partnerships with whoever it might be, whether it's employees or vendors or other parties you're entering into relationships with that actually work and that protect you. So I think as time goes on, it's important. I'm going to talk about compliance first because I am a lawyer. So, making sure again that you have your licenses in place, you're maintaining your permits if it's something you need to renew annually or every 5 years or whatever, what have you,
Mhm.
and that you're following applicable laws. So that can change over time. Sometimes with employment laws, the more employees you have different compliance requirements.
Mm.
So it's important to be aware of those as you're scaling and growing and taking on more employees, and you may need to change the way that you're doing things or make modifications to your employee handbook as time goes on.
Mm.
I also think it's important, especially for women, going back to the concept of being in the driver's seat, is upholding your organization's core values. You want to stay true to who you intend to be, and not kind of, unless you want to, go in a different direction, but you don't want to feel like you've sold out on your original goal unless the goal and the plan have changed.
Yes.
The other thing I would say is that as things are growing, if something doesn't feel right, stop and take a second and figure out why that is and try to come up with a solution when you first notice the problem rather than letting it boil over.
Okay. Got it.
So I think just as part of that, so going back to the constant evaluation
Yeah.
process,
Yeah.
even when things are going well, I think it's important to evaluate. So what's
Okay.
going right? What needs improvement? Am I safe? Are my contracts in good shape? When things are going right, that's the best time to build up your foundation. When
Yeah.
things are going wrong, it's a different story, right? The first thing is don't panic. Take a deep breath. Call
Mhm.
your advisors. You should have a team set up. So if you need to call your lawyer, you call your lawyer.
Yes.
Maybe you need to think about taking on an investor if you're having financial problems. Maybe you need to think about going to a bank, or you need to look back at your contracts and
Mhm.
see, okay, what does my contract say about this? So there's lots of strategies when things go wrong that we can employ to try and mitigate the problem even once something has happened, but it's
Okay.
important not to panic and spin out.
Yeah. It,
Easier said than done.
well, you're kind of what your description is, I think it's important to reiterate that it's almost you build a team, the team doesn't go away,
Right.
right? It's an ongoing, especially as you're scaling, right? It's a constant check-in, making sure that everything is moving along the way it should and that nothing's kind of falling through the cracks. And that's the importance of having that team there.
Yeah, exactly. We have lots of clients who call on us, every year or two and say, "Hey, I think I did this training a year or two ago. Do I need to do it again? And this is my current handbook. This is how many employees I have. Do I need to
Mhm.
do anything differently?
Yeah.
Or my lease is up for renewal. 5 years have gone by. I need to take on more space. How can I do that safely? And should I stay in this building or should I think about a different building?" So we're here for every step of the way.
Okay. So that was going to be my next question is there a rule of thumb with these entrepreneurs on how often they should check in with you?
I mean, we're here if you need us. We have reps
Yeah.
that call us more regularly just to check in. I think there are different ways to use a lawyer, right? So some people use a lawyer. I think we call them like a consigliere, right? Like people who are sort of part of the business but external to it. For
Yeah.
those types of clients, we're getting calls every day or sometimes more than once a day.
Yeah.
For others who we hear from with less frequency, it may be once a year. If you want to just check in and see, have there been any changes, either to your business or to the law,
Hmm.
and just kind of check in. And others really only call us when they really need a lawyer.
Okay.
The
The door is always open to check in
door
to
is
see.
always open.
Yeah.
We're always here.
Yeah. And just knowing you, I know that that's the case. So thank you for saying that. Let's talk about risk management. What are some common legal risks that entrepreneurs face, and how can they proactively manage or mitigate this?
Okay. So I think that the first one, I
Yep.
feel like we've driven this point home about
Mhm.
having the plan and
Yep.
having all the documents in place from the beginning. But
Yep.
the first risk, I think, is really informality. I think it's getting so excited about your idea and wanting to just push forward without necessarily doing the operating agreement to talk about the voting rights between partners or following the appropriate legal steps to take on an investor, having employment agreements in place, or negotiating protective contracts. When you do that, it's okay when things are going fine. The problems arise when things are not going fine and you don't have the appropriate foundation in place to look back and say, okay, what do I do in this situation? How am I protected? How am I safe? So I think the easiest thing to do, and I think we're done with this topic in a second, maybe, but really to have agreements and documents in place and really think through an efficient process for doing that, because you don't want to skip over it and then be stuck, saying, I wish I had done this. I wish I'd done that.
Yeah.
The other, I think, is need for funding. So
Okay.
I think a lot of times folks will realize as time goes on that in order to take the next big step, you might need some cash. So sometimes you may need to go to a bank, or you may need to, like I said earlier, take on an investor. So you need to make sure that you've had the proper entity structure from the beginning to allow yourself to do that, and then think through what it really means. A lot of times when you take on an investor, they'll give you cash in exchange for equity, right? So they'll be taking a percentage of your business ownership interest, and they will become your partner in some way, shape, or form. So we can try to limit that to a certain degree. We can also embrace that if they have something to bring to the table, but it's an important consideration about an investor. On the flip side, a bank will give you a loan, and they might take a security interest in the assets of the business. That could be real estate, that could be actual personal property assets, depending on what type of business you have.
Yeah.
And then often with a bank, you get into the world of a personal guarantee, which we'll talk about in a second. So a personal guarantee, we've spent all this time building up a legal structure to protect our personal assets from the assets of the business. And then if you sign a personal guarantee, you're basically saying, and I'm on the hook too. So it's kind of something that you need to think about, because very rarely do we see a bank loan that doesn't involve also a personal guarantee from the principals of the business. I think that starting small and growing methodically helps a bit with the need for cash, just so that you don't get in over your head. But I also think that eventually most businesses do end up having a relationship with a lender or taking on an investor, which is good. I mean, you sometimes you need to take a risk to grow.
Right. And to me, it's amazing. I mean, starting a business can go so many different directions so fast that if you have a team, I mean, I know you've been in the business for well over 10 years. You've seen so many different iterations, and I'm sure you find a good account in the same thing. Like you can have that team there to be like, well, this might be the direction you want to go in. We've seen this work. Do you have any examples, Robyn, of where it obviously being very general, but where you've seen things sort of derail?
Yes. So a lot of times it arises in the context of a partnership dispute, is what I'm thinking of right now off the top of my head, where you have two partners who don't have an operating agreement in place. They each purport to own 50-50 in a business, and one of them is a bad actor and is pulling cash from the business, using it personally, just kind of generally a bad guy. And then unfortunately, you don't have a strong operating agreement to protect you how to get rid of that person. So a lot of times it results in litigation, and then it ends up on my desk because they want to settle. So it ends up being a membership interest purchase where we have to do a buyout. One has to buy out the other. It's excessive legal fees on the litigation side to get you to the point of settlement, and then expensive on my side because we're doing a buyout. Whereas if you had a strong agreement in place to begin with, you might have had a provision in there that said, okay, if things aren't working out, this is what we do.
Yeah.
Sometimes litigation is unavoidable, even if you could have the best documents in the world. If you need to litigate, you need to litigate. But I do think having a framework helps.
I think business divorce can be just as nasty as, personal divorces. I mean, because if you're starting a business with a partner, there's a very good chance they're either friends or family.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so,
and that goes back to the informality, right? Because with informal, you think with someone who's a friend or family that everything's going to go fine. And
what
it
could
does
go
for
wrong?
quite a while until it doesn't.
Yes. I like that example. Thank you.
Sure.
So much of the entrepreneurship involves relationships with others, which obviously we talk about the impact of legal risk. What are you started to talk about this, but are there key elements of a contract that you can talk about to sort of mitigate some of this, some of this example that we just went through?
Sure. Yeah. So I just want to say first, when it comes to risk management, one of the things we talk about upfront with almost every one of our clients is that we cannot mitigate all risk. Risk exists.
I say that about the markets.
Yeah, risk exists, and it feels very scary, especially when people do have personal assets tied up in their business or they've invested a lot in it. But I think knowing that and saying, okay, risk is always going to be there. I might not be a person who takes on huge risks. I might be a person who takes on only small calculated risks, or I might be a person who totally goes for it. But knowing sort of what your own risk tolerance is in any given situation is really important. And it's something that you learn over time. You may not know it from day one. But I think that rather than getting paralyzed by the fact that we all know that risk exists, we can sort of try to effectively manage and mitigate it.
Mhm.
And you mentioned earlier where we're talking about contracts now. So this is really relationships with third parties. And my first question was about planning, and now, or my first answer was about planning, and now my second answer is about planning. So I think before you even enter into any contracts or partnerships with anybody, it's important to think about, why am I doing this? And who is my partner? Who is this third party that I'm entering into a relationship with? And I'm thinking now, we'll talk about employees in a little while. So I'm talking now about whether it's a vendor, whether it's a provider of services, whatever it may be. I think you need to think about, what are their values and goals? Do they have a great reputation? What type of investment are they willing to make into the relationship? Are they willing to commit and formalize and sign an agreement, or are they rushing you? They just want to come up and do the work, and, don't worry about insurance. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Well, we got you. Don't worry. I think it's really important to make sure that you have an organization or a person or whoever it might be that you trust and who trusts you. Red flags are disorganization, bad reputation. If you look online, I mean, we have the benefit of the internet, so look online and see what their reputation is. If it seems like they are underfunded, it seems like they are not committal, they won't sign anything, they don't want to put anything down on paper, or if there's too much red tape and they won't negotiate with you on anything, those are all red flags to me. That, is this really a partner that you want? Because what you want to see is someone who's getting as much out of the relationship as you are, and who's willing to bend a little, and who's willing to compromise and negotiate and formalize to protect everybody who's involved, because a contract protects everyone, not just a good contract protects everyone, I guess I should say.
Okay.
So once you've said to yourself, okay, I looked online, I've done everything that I can possibly do, I've talked to other people who have worked with this company before in the past, I'm ready to go. I think it's also important, pause. Is this a company, a real company? Where are they from? Are they local? How many lawsuits have they had lately? So this is like due diligence, right? We do this in every kind of deal that we work on, whether it's real estate, M&A, any type of deal, and involves due diligence, and so should third-party relationships. And I'm not saying you have to spend months and months and months digging up every skeleton in the closet, but do a little bit of due diligence and just make sure this is a legit organization and they're not going to, take you for a ride, basically. The other thing to think about is, like, what will my customers base think about this partnership? If, depending on what type of business it is, like, how will this strategic move be viewed by the people who are most important to me? And then the other thing is, put it down on paper. Put it down on paper. So I hear a lot from my clients about MOUs. I have a memorandum of understanding. It's not, is it binding? Is it not binding? This concept that an MOU is somehow something less than a contract. My position is, even if you don't call an MOU a contract, or if you don't necessarily mean for it to be binding the way a contract is, there's certainly a very good argument that it constitutes a contract. So I don't think that anyone should feel safe that they have an MOU in place rather than a formal contract. There are language that we can use when we don't intend to be bound, but oftentimes we don't see that in an MOU. So it's just people who may be loosely putting down ideas on paper and ending up with a contract. That doesn't include everything that they'd want to include.
Absolutely. And Robyn, you probably get this question all the time. Like, can you go online and create your own business document? Like, what?
Well, with AI and other things, you certainly can try. I would say, proceed with caution. AI is getting very smart, and I think that there's a lot that folks can do with AI, both professionals and also individuals.
Yeah.
I would proceed with caution because it is imperfect. And a lot of times, if you have AI analyze something, it will misread it. It will miscite cases. It will make errors.
Yes.
And it may also just not grab the concept of what it is that you're trying to do. So I think AI is going to be here. So I think folks need to learn how to live with it and work with it.
Sure.
One strategy that I might suggest alongside that would be to invest the money in a lawyer and come up with a template that you like. And anyone that you're entering into a contract with, just send them the template. So at least then you've got something that has been vetted, and you're not buying the same lawyer time over and over and over again, if that makes sense.
No, and thank you for that answer. Because the other way I'm thinking of it too is I feel like these laws are constantly changing. Every state is different. If this is something that you really truly are going to, so many entrepreneurs always say, this is my baby. Like if you're having a baby, why not make sure that it's protected in the best way possible? So to
Right.
me, I'm like, why wouldn't I just hire a really good attorney and build a team? But this question it comes up all the time, you
Yeah,
know.
more and more. I mean, we get clients who are running documents through AI, and there's risk that comes along with that in the form of confidentiality and privilege. And, we're navigating that, all of us, the whole
All
industry
together at
together.
the same time.
Yeah,
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 absolutely. So thank you for answering that.
yeah. So just
And
wanna, can I mention the elements of the contract? Because I didn't get to that.
yes, please.
I
Yes.
know everyone's on the edge of their seat just
Yeah.
waiting.
You said something that triggered me, so I'm sorry. I
Oh,
completely
go ahead. No,
pivoted
no, go
you.
ahead.
No, no, no,
No.
no. That was when I pivoted you. So go.
Oh,
Yes,
that's
please.
all right.
Let's go through the elements.
Right. So this is very, very, very high level, but important things to have in your contract. Okay. Who are the parties to the contract? It sounds elementary, but it's easy to skip over. What is the term of the contract? Is this a one-time event or is this a longer term arrangement over a period of time? What is the purpose and what are the responsibilities of the parties? So what services are being provided? What payments are due? When are they due? How are we measuring success here? And I think it's really important, whether it's through a statement of work or another description of what the services that are being provided are, to articulate this because it's otherwise can be very difficult to know whether or not someone has fulfilled their obligations under a contract.
Mm,
Sometimes there are something called KPIs, like a performance indicator. Sometimes there's milestones, whatever it might be. It's important to articulate what the deliverable is and when it's due.
okay.
There are provisions in a contract that we often include to address liability. One of them is called indemnification. So I guess I'll just use an example. So if I'm giving you space to hold an event or a fundraiser and I don't salt the sidewalks and somebody slips and falls, our agreement should spell out who has responsibility in that case. If I've agreed to indemnify you
Right.
for that type of incident, then I would make you whole for any costs that your guest sues you, you have costs, and I agree to make you whole. That would be me indemnifying you. The
Okay.
other thing we can do is include limitations of liability. So we could say my liability is capped at, whatever you pay me over a 12-month period, or there are other ways that we can sort of manage liability contractually. These are really, really important provisions that are almost always negotiated in a contract, between lawyers in a contract, and no matter
Okay.
what type of contract it is.
I, I feel like we live in such a litigious world. Why would you not want to have an ironclad sort of document versus just creating a, you know, um,
I
broad
think,
template
yeah.
online, you know?
Well,
Um,
even so, a broad template can have this, and then if someone tries to negotiate it with you, you can say, "Okay, I got to go back to my lawyer. This was what they said was fine, and if you accept it, great, and if not,
yeah.
back to the lawyer."
Okay.
It's
No.
just a way to kind of save legal time for entrepreneurs who are just getting started up and don't want to have to say, "Okay, every contract, whether it's $500 or $500,000, is going to the legal team."
Yeah, because the other thing that entrepreneurs always complain about is that they just don't have enough time, right? They're
Yeah,
spending all their time on their business. So
yeah.
this is the last, sorry, you're the last thing they want to think of
Sometimes
sometimes
when things are going well,
when it's
sometimes.
going well. Exactly. We hope it goes well.
So the other things to think about are insurance provisions, insurance requirements for both sides, and you'll both be providing each other insurance certificates. So it's a great time to talk to your insurance agent or broker when you're entering into a new contract to say, "Hey, I'm doing a contract for this. What type of insurance should I be looking for and what amounts? Do I have sufficient insurance? And I need to list them as additional insured or what have you, and we need to exchange certificates. Get them when you're signing a contract or before you're signing a contract, because once the contract is out of the gate and everyone's performing, and something goes awry, you'll be looking for the insurance certificate. So if you don't have it, it's very difficult to get it at that time.
Mhm. Okay.
Contracts will have representations and warranties. So each party will be making representations about why they're qualified to perform the service, or why they're, about their business, where they're formed, how that they legally exist, etc. Very important to make true and accurate representations and to get them from the parties you're contracting with. Provisions for breach. How do I terminate? What are the damages if somebody breaches? Special tax provisions. So the list really goes on and on. How do I deal with my intellectual property, which is another thing we're not talking about today for entrepreneurs, but it is something important to think about
Absolutely.
to develop and protect your intellectual property, because that is critical and you do not want your partners to be taking it from you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Connecticut law governing, you want to pick a governing law, and make sure, this seems like the simplest one, but I'm going to say it slowly, make sure everybody signs.
Yes.
A lot of times folks show up with a contract and say, well, we went back and forth on this for 6 months but we never signed it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes our job as lawyers and enforcing those contracts very difficult.
Amazing. I see that all the time with wills and other personal documents. So thank you for saying that.
Yep.
And have you found you mentioned Connecticut law, right? Because you're sitting in Connecticut.
Mhm.
Are these states very different? And
Yeah,
if they are different, is there a certain element that makes them different?
it depends. Is that a good answer? It really depends from state to state on what it might be, but something especially when it comes to employee relations, that is very state specific and state law driven. And there are
Okay.
federal laws, obviously, as well that apply to everyone.
Yeah.
So if you're taking on employees or remote employees, it's very important to know the specific state laws and the laws where they are. Um,
Okay.
and I was just reviewing a contract today that came in, and it's with a lender, and it purports to be governed by Ohio law. So I'm not licensed in Ohio. So it makes it very difficult when you have a contract that is, supposed to be governed by the laws of a state where your lawyer's not practicing. And, we usually try to correct that by having it governed by Connecticut law.
Yeah. Okay. Man, there's so many nuances.
I know, I'm sorry.
Let's take it one step further. So we've been talking about the business assets, but how should business owners think about aligning the personal assets with the business assets in terms of protection as they scale?
Right. So first and foremost is operate your business. Once you have a business, operate it like a real business. By that, I mean, form your entity, keep the assets of the business separate from your personal assets. So have a real bank account, have a real credit card for your business. They allow you to do that in the name of your business, and you should keep it separate. You should deposit all company funds in the company bank account, and then you can make distributions from there pursuant to your operating agreement or your governing documents.
Okay.
I would say issue invoices, create paper trails, and really observe all we call it corporate formalities, the trappings of a business. So hold meetings if you have multiple members, really take votes on things and keep a record, take minutes. These are all important things because it's one thing to have an entity, but to really protect your assets, you also need to operate that entity like a business.
Okay. Yep.
The other thing I had touched on a minute ago was about personal guarantees. So I think the other thing to just be aware of is that in the business world, there are such things as guarantees. And sometimes you do have to take a personal risk on your assets, but there are ways to limit those guarantees. You can there are different types of limited guarantees that we can do. And you might not know that unless you specifically are talking to a lawyer who can help you limit your personal liability in that way. So those are just two strategies that we use to try to limit personal liability.
Can you think off the top of your head of any examples of that?
Of times when folks haven't been able to, or times
Yeah. Yeah.
well, I think a lot of times it does come up in the lease context quite a bit, where people don't realize, like, when you're negotiating a lease, you think you're doing the right thing by forming an entity, and then all of a sudden your landlord turns around and requires you to have a personal guarantee.
Okay.
So, and you could feel trapped by that.
Yeah.
It is common and customary because they don't want to be dealing just with a single member entity and not get the protection of having the principal also on the hook for the obligations of the company.
Right.
But I think the way to feel safe about that is to know the financial wherewithal of your company and to not commingle your personal assets, and to know, okay, my company's in great shape. It's going to be able to adhere to its obligations under the lease. So I don't feel as much at risk with this personal guarantee as I might otherwise. And if you feel like your company cannot uphold its legal obligations, perhaps avoid a personal guarantee if you're trying to protect your personal assets.
Interesting. Okay.
The
And
other context that it comes up, I'm not a litigator, but I know there is a legal process they call it piercing the corporate veil. So if you have an entity and you're not upholding like I said before, corporate formalities of actually running it like a business, there is a legal way to get to the personal assets of the principals, even when there is a company. Not to scare anyone. And like I said, I'm not a litigator, but there is a way to do it, which is why we say really do try to run your business like a business.
Like a business. And I think, Robyn, one of the biggest challenges, I don't know if you've come across this, but when you talk to women entrepreneurs, especially women, they talk about multiple streams of income. Like that's a very popular theme. What do you say to a woman who is thinking of this new stream of income? She doesn't know yet if it's a business, but she's sort of feeling it out and she's still doing, still got her full-time job. What level, I guess, is there a level where you would say, okay, now it's time for you to start treating this like a business?
From the minute somebody comes in to speak with me, I treat them like a business because
Okay.
that is how I view them.
Yeah.
They're at some stage of a business. So the first conversation that we're having is about an entity and whether or not they have one, and whether or not they vetted their name to make sure they haven't just stolen somebody else's name and then are
Yeah.
going to get hit with a letter of complaint immediately
Yep.
right off the bat. So for me, every potential client of mine, if they have a stream of income, is a business owner.
They
And
need to start thinking that way.
yes,
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
they don't
And
necessarily need to have an employee handbook in place, but I think they should be thinking of themselves as a business or moving in the direction of a business from the get-go. And I think if it's just an idea of like, okay, I'm making cupcakes out of my kitchen right now, I think, when you've tested you have proof of concept and you're really starting to get some traction, that's
Mhm.
the moment.
Okay.
Because once you've taken off and you can't keep up with the cupcake orders, then the horse is out of the stable.
That's perfect because most often people are waiting until the horse is out of the stable.
Yeah, and I know, and it can happen fast,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I think there's a feeling of a risk in, counting your chickens before they hatch, so to speak, and setting up the legal processes before you have proof of concept. So it's a little bit like,
Yeah.
which do I do first? And I
Right.
think it never hurts to have a call with someone like me to say, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'd like to do this in a bigger, broader way. What would be the steps that I would have to follow to do that to the bare minimum?
Love
And we
it.
can have a very open and honest conversation about what that would look like. And from there, we'll help you scale.
Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Mhm.
So let's talk about hiring that first employee.
Okay.
What are the legal requirements, documents that one needs to consider in this situation?
Okay. My second laundry list or my third laundry list of this session today. So I think that it's important to first come up with a list of job duties. What is the function of this role? What are their responsibilities? How am I going to know if they are not meeting their obligations?
Mhm.
It's important if you have a role in mind to think about what licensure or registration might be required to carry out the job, and
Mhm.
make sure that whoever it is that you are looking at for the role either is licensed or carries the appropriate registration or is in line to do so. Employers often think about background checks. There are laws around background checks and the way that you can use the results of a background check. So just beware if that is something that you want to consider and that you want to use, to talk to a lawyer about the best way to implement that process.
Yep.
We recommend documenting the working relationship at the very simplest level through an offer letter. Just setting out the basic terms of employment, setting out that this is employment at will, meaning that the relationship can be terminated at any time for any
Mm.
lawful reason. Some employer clients of ours prefer to use a formal employment agreement, which is just basically a beefed up version, of the offer letter that has more specifics around the role, especially for more senior level jobs. And
Okay.
people will ask for that.
Yeah.
Um, and I want to just we'll come back to this in a second, but making sure you've thought through employee classification, both whether they're an independent contractor or an employee, and whether or not, if they are an employee, whether or not they are subject to or entitled to overtime payments.
Mm.
So compliance, legal compliance. We also, when you're thinking about hiring your first employee, one thing to think about doing is getting an employee handbook. When you have just one employee, you may think to yourself, okay, I'm not ready. I'm not really there yet.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's something to talk to a lawyer about. What is the cost? At what point do I need an employee handbook? And it's also a very good way to familiarize yourself with the law, because once you take on an employee, you have responsibilities under the law to that employee, and there are certain protections that they're entitled to. So if
Yep.
you don't know that, it makes your job as an employer that much more difficult, because things do arise with employees.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yep.
I guess the last thing I would say in my laundry list is looking at regulatory compliance. So registering with the Department of Revenue Services, Department of Labor, unemployment, workers' compensation insurance. All those things are things that you need to be thinking about from the minute you take on your first employee.
Let's go back to making cupcakes in the kitchen.
Okay.
You hire someone and maybe it starts part-time. Like what would be your answer to someone that is we're feeling it out, we're making cupcakes, but I'm making so many cupcakes that I have someone coming in to help me part-time.
I would say you have an employee.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, because a lot of times they'll say, okay, well, I'm just paying them a 1099. And that's the first sort of mistake that I would say that a lot of people make when they are getting started is they're saying, okay, the difference between an independent contractor and an employee is just that one gets a W-2 and one gets a 1099, right? They even call them 1099s and W-2s. It's not that simple, unfortunately, under
Mm.
federal or state law. There's actually a quite complex factual legal analysis that goes on to determine whether you've taken on an employee or you've taken on an independent contractor. And there's a significant legal difference. So I mentioned before that employees have a significant set of rights under federal and state law. You could
Hmm.
think about, paid family leave. You could think about non-discrimination laws, wage and hours laws, timekeeping, all these things, potential for overtime. Independent contractors don't have those rights because they are technically a separate company that you are engaging to perform a service for you. They pay their own self-employment taxes. They don't get the benefit of non-discrimination laws,
Yeah.
employment non-discrimination laws. And oftentimes these folks want to be categorized as an independent contractor until there's a problem. And then
Hmm.
all of a sudden they're like, you know, I probably could make a claim for overtime. And then once they do that, then you're in a reanalysis phase, figuring out, did I properly classify this person? Do I have
Yep.
employment taxes that I owe? What are the damages? And am I going to now get audited by the Department of Labor of everybody who works here? That's a situation that, you don't want to find yourself in.
Yes, absolutely. Are there other, so those are a couple of mistakes that can be pretty common. Are there any others that you can think of?
So the other that I mentioned before is overtime exempt versus non-exempt. Those are the words we use when we're talking about overtime. Some
Okay.
employees are exempt from overtime and some are not exempt from overtime. Oftentimes, folks will simplify that as I'm paid on a salary basis, so I don't get overtime, or I'm paid hourly, so I do. Of course, it's not that simple. So it's important to get a lawyer on board from day one to say, okay, this is the type of business that I'm in. I'm looking to bring this person on to work for me. What is the proper classification? And once we've decided that they are an employee, are they entitled to overtime?
Yep. Okay.
And if so, what are the timekeeping requirements? And how do I make sure I'm properly documenting this so that I know how much to pay them,
Ab
basically.
Absolutely.
The
Okay.
third thing that jumped to mind thinking about women entrepreneurs specifically, that comes up with bringing on employees and thinking about the risk of informality is I think that women bosses tend to be extremely empathetic and sympathetic and also to bring on friends. So it's a great way of building up trust and building up loyalty with your employees to be sympathetic and to be empathetic and to
Mm.
sort of let things slide. But then I think it lends itself to taking advantage. And
Hmm.
so the employer then finds themselves in a situation where they've had a course of dealing of letting things slide and slide and slide and slide. And then suddenly they reach a boiling point and it's very difficult then to push things in the other direction.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you for going through those. My head is spinning.
I'm
So
sorry.
no, I guess last question, unless it sparks another one for me. How can entrepreneurs ensure that they're compliant with all these laws? Like what protections can they put in place for the business, for the employees, aside from the obvious they need to come talk to you?
Yeah. It's partially part of it is talking to a lawyer. And the
Yeah.
other part, I think, is just taking advantage of resources that are out there and opportunities to educate yourself.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
there are a lot of organizations that provide webinars and trainings. Some of them are law firms that will offer them, and some of them are professional organizations that will say, come learn about wage and hour laws.
Yeah.
It's important to make yourself aware of what the laws are because you may not know when you're stepping into a problem until you're already in it.
Hmm.
And while you can't know everything and you can't expect yourself to know everything, you can educate yourself so that you know enough to sniff out a problem when one is starting. I think the other, as you said, have a lawyer on your team. But I think also just taking responsibility for having some awareness of what it means to be an employer is also very important.
Okay. And when you say resources, I'm thinking obviously of resources from chambers, libraries, Women's Business Development Council, I know is very
Yes,
prominent in our
WBDC.
area.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So are there other resources outside of the ones that I'm thinking of from out loud?
Um, I know there's an organization called, I think they call it SHRM, which is
Yep.
an HR based
Yes.
organization it's a membership organization that HR professionals can join that has a lot of really great resources out there.
Yes. I forgot about them.
And the
Okay.
other is honestly using other entrepreneurs and talking to each other,
Yeah.
saying, okay, what's going on? How many employees do you have now? How are you doing this? Do you have a handbook? What have you learned? And
Yeah.
staying connected to each other. There's a lot of women's business organizations, and just kind of like putting it all out there and saying, hey, this is where I am. This is, what do you know? What have you learned? And where should I
Yeah.
be looking? And who should I be talking to?
You just made me think I interviewed a female entrepreneur on the podcast not that long ago, and she's sort of in the tech space. And she said that one of the things that has really helped her is they have an organization of entrepreneurs within tech that she leans very heavily on, which I think that, I would, if I was building something out, I'm not original enough to think of anything like this to be an entrepreneur, but I think I would want to be surrounded
Aren't
by
we on your
like-minded.
podcast?
Yeah. Is already a stretch. But I think I would want like-minded people,
Right.
aside from sort of the professional sort of team that you build, but you would want like-minded people because this is clearly going to be an emotional roller coaster, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah, you're learning together. I think obviously the risk in that is perpetuating something, practices that are not right
Yeah,
or incorrect assumptions. But the benefit of it is a shared experience together and taking advantage of collective, experience of pitfalls and things that go really great.
yeah, absolutely. Robin, thank you.
Thank
This is
you.
a lot of information, and I
Yeah,
know I know when we started this, we're like, let's just boil it down, right? We always start there, but it's you can only boil it down so much. So I
I'm
appreciate
sorry
that.
for all my laundry lists, but I hope that
No,
somebody out there finds it useful. And I think, the list can be overwhelming, and they're not meant to overwhelm. They're just meant to remind you that there is a lot to think about and that you're not expected to know everything. And
yes,
that's why there are professionals that exist who can help.
absolutely. And Robin, if anyone wanted to come find you, where would you want me to direct them?
Our website, or my
Perfect.
LinkedIn, I guess, but our website, cohenandwolf.com.
Cohenandwolf.com. Yep.
Yep.
And you're on LinkedIn and okay.
I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
That was fun.
Yeah. You are always welcome back. We appreciate it.